U.S. President Donald Trump says he plans to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un later this year. He also offered an updated assessment of Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal, saying the regime holds 57 very powerful nuclear weapons. Kim Yo-jong, the powerful sister of the North Korean leader, cast doubt on claims by Trump, saying she is unaware of whether or not her brother has had contact with the U.S. president. She also says scaling back joint military exercises between Seoul and Washington does little to ease tensions. China's top diplomat Wang is in Seoul and met with his South Korean counterpart Cho-hyun to urge China to bring North Korea back to talks, while Wang said the U.S. must change its long-standing hostile policy towards North Korea. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. U.S. President Donald Trump is hinting at a potential meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un later this year. And for the first time, Trump specifically mentioned the size of Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal, a move that could signal a policy shift by Washington. Our Park Jun-an reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump once again highlighted his personal relationship with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and said he would meet Kim for a summit later this year. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump also provided an update on the exact size of Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal.
The fact that I get along with him, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. He has 57 very powerful nuclear weapons. Should have never allowed it to happen. They should have never allowed it. If I were president, I wouldn't have allowed it, but he's got them.
Trump also confirmed he expects to meet Kim Jong-un later this year. The U.S. president could potentially be in Asia in mid-November for the annual APEC summit, which is being held in China. Trump's specific mention of 57 nuclear warheads closely aligns with recent estimates from international think tanks. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute recently estimated that North Korea has assembled around 60 warheads, while the U.S. Congressional Research Service cited estimates at around 50. However, a sitting U.S. president publicly confirming this number is raising questions about a potential policy shift. For decades, the U.S. has maintained a stance of complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of North Korea. But openly recognizing the specific number of weapons is being interpreted by some as treating North Korea as a de facto nuclear power. With the U.S. administration showing a strong preference for deal-making, some say the U.S. could recognize North Korea as a nuclear-armed state and change its diplomatic stance by seeking a freeze of its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. Park Jun-an, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung has said he respects U.S. President Donald Trump's efforts to create an environment to resume dialogue with North Korea. Writing on his social media on Wednesday, he said he agreed with President Trump's will and efforts to build peace on the Korean Peninsula, even at the cost of scaling down the annual Seoul-Washington combined defense drills. He also said he fully agreed with Trump that Seoul should be responsible for its own defense, highlighting the country's robust defense capability. On the efforts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the South Korean president noted that the country will continue to closely communicate with the United States and review its contribution within the purview of domestic law. President Lee Jae-myung added that he hoped to meet his American counterpart in the near future. North Korea says scaling back South Korea-U.S. military drills does little to ease tensions as long as the exercises continue. Kim Yo-jong, the powerful sister of the North's leader, said she is unaware whether her brother communicated with U.S. President Donald Trump, but did say her brother has personally good memories and feelings towards the U.S. leader. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
North Korea says it is more focused on the continued South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises than on Washington's decision to scale them back. Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, said Wednesday that the ongoing drills remain what Pyongyang considers a clear expression of hostility. Her comments came as South Korea and the United States are shortening their annual Urchi Freedom Shield exercise following a request from Washington. In a statement carried by North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency, Kim said reducing the scale or duration of the exercises does not change what she called their provocative and aggressive nature. She added that Pyongyang has no interest whatsoever in U.S. President Donald Trump's move to scale back the drills. The allies are now scheduled to conclude the Urji Freedom Shield on Friday, cutting the exercise nearly in half from its original 11-day schedule of August 17th through August 27th. Kim also addressed Trump's recent claim that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un had responded to his outreach for dialogue. She says she was unaware of any recent communication between the two leaders, saying it was something she knew absolutely nothing about. Trump said Monday that Kim had responded to his overture and described their conversation as very positive. Kim Yo-jong acknowledged that her brother continues to have good personal memories and feelings toward Trump. However, she stressed that those personal ties do not change Pyongyang's view of current U.S. military activities. She said North Korea considers its efforts to strengthen its defenses reasonable and necessary, as long as it believes its national security is being threatened. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
China's top diplomat is here in South Korea and will be meeting President Lee Jae-myung and National Security Advisor Ri Sung-lang later today, following talks with Foreign Minister Cho Hyun on bilateral ties and North Korea. Our Oh Soo-young has the details of their meeting.
Seoul has called on Beijing to help bring North Korea back to dialogue and support efforts towards denuclearization as Seoul and Beijing seek to fully restore bilateral ties. Foreign Minister Cho Hyun and his Chinese counterpart Wang met in Seoul on Wednesday for their first foreign ministers' talks in 11 months. The two sides once again maintained their respective positions on North Korea.
As much as President Lee Jae-myung presented a blueprint for peaceful coexistence on the Korean peninsula in his recent Liberation Day address, the government will continue working toward the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula and the achievement of peace.
Cho asked Beijing to play a constructive role in securing Pyongyang's return to talks. According to Seoul's readout, Wang said China's policy remained consistent and pledged to keep playing a constructive role in promoting peace and stability.
We also hope that South Korea and North Korea can gradually move along the path towards peace and coexistence, and sincerely wish for the continued stability and development of the Korean peninsula.
The Chinese minister, however, did not mention denuclearization. As Wang left his meeting, he told media that renewed dialogue was a matter for the United States and North Korea to decide. He placed the onus on Washington, saying it must change its long-standing hostile policy towards North Korea.
In wanting to maintain some form of trilateral alignment among North Korea, China, and Russia, this is not necessarily disadvantageous for China in building a front against the U.S. Thus, China has no reason to step in directly and try to persuade North Korea.
This highlights lingering differences between Seoul and Beijing amid deepening US-China rivalry over regional security and technology. Still, both sides have sought to rebuild cooperation, with the ministers saying that there was steady improvement in their bilateral ties following reciprocal state visits by their leaders.
This marks Wang's first official visit to Korea in almost 5 years and comes ahead of the two countries' 34th anniversary of diplomatic relations, which falls on August 24th.
The ministers agreed to use next year's 35th anniversary to elevate their ties, focusing on services and investment negotiations under the bilateral free trade agreement, supply chain stability, people-to-people and cultural exchanges, bringing pandas to Korea, and preserving Korean independence movement sites in China. Looking ahead, Wang said Beijing was considering another summit if President Lee attends the APEC meeting in Shenzhen this November. Wang also invited Cho to China at a mutually convenient time. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump says the United States will inflict, quote, tremendous economic consequences on those that engage in business activities with Iran. In a statement on social media on Wednesday, Trump declared what he called the most crushing economic operation against any country, without giving further details or naming specific countries. The announcement comes after a 60-day ceasefire between the United States and Iran expired on Monday without agreement. In April, the U.S. imposed sanctions on foreign banks and firms doing business with Iran. And the U.S. national debt has crossed $40 trillion for the first time, as persistent federal budget deficits continue to push government borrowing higher. U.S. Treasury Department data released Wednesday shows the gross national debt reached just over $40.04 trillion as of August 18th. The milestone comes only about 5 months after the debt surpassed $39 trillion in March. The debt is rising rapidly due in part to higher interest costs driven by elevated interest rates and the growing size of the debt itself. Federal spending on programs including Social Security and Medicare is also increasing as the U.S. population ages. Here in South Korea, the benchmark KOSPI climbed over 5% this morning, driven by strong gains in semiconductor stocks, triggering a buy-side sidecar, temporarily halting program trading for 5 minutes. SK hynix shares were trading more than 10% higher early in the session, following its announcement the previous day to buy back and retire $28.6 billion of stock. It will be the largest share retirement of its kind in the history of Korean-listed companies, a move that directly boosts value for existing investors by permanently reducing the total number of shares in the market. Samsung Electronics also showed strength early in the session. Towering turbines are reshaping the waters off Korea's southwest coast as one of the country's largest offshore wind projects nears completion. Our Shin-so reports.
As cleaner energy and reduced reliance on non-renewable and imported fuels become increasingly important to national competitiveness, Korea is racing to capture more offshore wind, a resource that could help shape the next era of its energy transition. Leveraging an abundant and freely available resource at scale, the Nagwar offshore wind farm stretches across the sea, about 20 kilometers off the coast of Pyongyang.
Up close, a massive scale of these turbines is striking, and the power generated from here must be transmitted back to the mainland. 33 turbines are currently in operation, but when 64 of them becomes fully online, this wind farm can create electricity to around 250,000 households.
According to the International Energy Agency, every gigawatt of offshore wind that replaces coal-fired power can avoid more than 3.5 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions each year. Korea is set to emerge as a new gigawatt-scale offshore wind market as global capacity is set to nearly quadruple by 2030.
Construction began in March 2024 and is now 90% complete. Once finished, Nagwar will add 365 megawatts, more than doubling Korea's offshore wind capacity to 718 megawatts.
Each turbine is powered by 81-meter blades that span a 165-meter rotor diameter, which is 1.5 football fields across. Then, electricity generated by each turbine is carried ashore through subsea cables. The turbine can generate energy automatically and shut down in extreme weather conditions like typhoons for safety precautions. 360-degree monitoring cameras also help prevent wildlife collisions.
Each turbine has hundreds of sensors tracking wind, power output, temperature, and vibration in real time, allowing us to monitor its condition remotely.
With President Lee Jae-myung's aerial inspection of the Nagwar site in June, the administration plans to expand offshore wind capacity to at least 25 gigawatts by 2035 through greater investment in technology, grids, port, and supply chains. Beyond generating power, experts say the true measure of offshore wind lies in the value it returns to local communities through long-term opportunities like additional jobs and tax revenue. This means offshore wind power can turn residents from compensation recipients into lasting partners in the transition to more renewable energy. Shin So-eun, Arirang News, Wang.
Maritime education institutions from South Korea and the Philippines have joined hands to train the next generation of global maritime professionals, a partnership both sides hope will strengthen their industries for years to come. Our Kim Sa-young reports.
A delegation from Philippine Merchant Marine Academy, or PMMA, founded in 1920, has paid a visit to Bukpo National Maritime University. Both schools share the same mission, raising leaders who will make the ocean their stage. This visit was about finding new ways to work together toward that goal.
As maritime nations, the Philippines and the Republic of Korea share a common vision of strengthening human capital, innovation, and sustainability in the global maritime industry.
During the visit, the PMMA delegation got a first-hand look at Bukpo's high-tech ship bridge simulator. They also toured a shipyard that builds submarines, a cornerstone of Korea's defense industry. For the Philippines' oldest maritime academy, the visit laid the groundwork for joint research, technology transfer, and deeper cooperation ahead.
Our two institutions will work to find practical ways to cooperate through student exchanges, onboard training, maritime education programs, and international exchange.
With the shared goal of raising the next generation of maritime leaders, the two universities say this is only the beginning of a cooperation they plan to keep building on. Kim Seoyoung, Arirang News.
This is the world now. In the United States, the Federal Reserve appears to be moving closer to raising interest rates. Minutes from last month's Federal Open Market Committee meeting released on Wednesday show the Fed's deepening concern about inflation. The Fed held its benchmark rate in a range of 3.5 to 3.75% in July, but three policymakers voted for a quarter-point increase. The minutes say, quote, many officials said tightening would likely be needed if inflation does not come down to the Fed's 2% target. Those who favored an increase said price pressures were, quote, broad-based. They warned that waiting could mean a steeper and more costly round of hikes later on. This comes as President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that, quote, interest rates are artificially high and should come down. In Kenya, a tourist helicopter has crashed, killing everyone on board. 5 Americans and Ecuador's head of intelligence are among the 7 dead. The helicopter came down on Wednesday in Samburu County in northern Kenya. It was carrying passengers to a wildlife reserve and safari destination. The U.S. State Department said on Wednesday that 5 Americans were killed. Ecuador's presidential office said its intelligence chief also died along with his wife, a U.S. citizen. The tour company that ran the excursion said the cause of the crash has not been determined. The Kenya Red Cross said difficult terrain and a fire at the site are slowing the recovery. In India, a fire tore through a hotel in the eastern city of Kolkata early on Wednesday. At least 9 people are dead, including 5 from Bangladesh. 4 of those were from a family who had come to Kolkata for medical treatment. The fire started on the 2nd floor at around 2:50 in the morning local time and was under control within an hour. Around 80 people were evacuated. Authorities say an electrical short circuit may be to blame. In the United States, drug makers Moderna and Merck said on Wednesday that their experimental cancer vaccine worked in a late-stage trial. It kept melanoma, a deadly skin cancer, from coming back or spreading. The vaccine is built for 1 patient at a time from the genetic profile of that person's own tumor. More than 1,000 patients took part. Moderna's shares more than doubled on Wednesday, and Merck's stock hit an all-time high. This is the first successful late-stage trial of a personalized mRNA cancer therapy. Judihan, Arirang News.
It certainly does not feel like summer is ready to let go just yet, with heat advisories and nighttime heat advisories being in place mainly in southern regions. And with hot and humid air continuing to move in, much of the country will see feels like temperatures of around 33 degrees Celsius this afternoon. The sky will stay mostly cloudy in many parts except for the capital region, with scattered showers developing across the country. In certain parts of Korea, we'll see 5 to 60 millimeters of passing showers, while Jeju-do Island will see 5 to 40 millimeters of rainfall through late this afternoon. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 31 degrees Celsius. Daejeon, Gyeongju, Busan, Jeju will all make it to 32 degrees. Then another band of rain will begin across central Korea from early tomorrow morning and will continue into Saturday morning, bringing a brief break from the heat in some areas.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.